Good morning one more time. My name is Nikolai Megitz, and I'm editor-in-chief of Journal of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Thank you for your participation in session 2. Session 1 was conducted on Tuesday, and we very much appreciate those people who were interested in listening to presenters. And today's is a continue of our workshop on how to perform high-quality research and become published in peer-review journal. The workshop is organized by the Institute of Eastern Europe and Central Asia in cooperation with Webster University in St. Louis, Missouri. As I mentioned, objective of these 2 sessions is to discuss and learn from experienced researchers on the topic of methodology and scientific writings of high-quality articles and how to be published in Western peer-review journals. Some technical aspects that I would like to discuss with you in advance. First is all microphones are muted except panelists, but please post your questions in the chat room, and I will do my best to monitor them and pass them like last week during presentations to the speakers and have them answer your questions. I would like to have those both sessions, especially today, as interactive as possible. And at the end, we will have a certificate issued, but conditions are that you have to participate in both sessions and to finish some write-ups that you will be instructed after today. And again, both sessions are recorded, and they will be posted on our website right after these 2 workshops. Okay, with this, I would like to move to our presentations, and as you know from last week, we have a very valuable list of panelists, and for today's session, we invited even 2 panelists from Eastern Europe and Central Asia, one from Ukraine, one from Kazakhstan, to share their experience on research as well. And I look forward that you will have a chance to learn from all of them. Like last week, we had Dr. David Ahlstrom talking on general issues related to research. And today, Dr. Ahlstrom would continue specifically talk on the subject writing your introduction and outlining your paper to facilitate publications. And with this, I would like to pass microphone to Dr. Ahlstrom. Doctor, if you can hear me, please start your presentation. Are you online, Doctor?
Okay. Can you hear me okay, Nikolai?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Thank you, Dr.
Okay. And you're going to switch the slides for me. So I think you told me I have about 40 minutes. Is that right?
That is correct. And I hope we will use them very, very productively.
Okay, good. Thank you, everyone. Good to be back today. On Tuesday, the other day, I spoke about what I call paper organization, which is a very common way that papers in management, international business, and other parts of the social sciences are commonly organized, especially empirical papers. And I talked about that, and one of the papers I wrote discussed this outline in detail. It's a 2013 paper I wrote with Gary Bruton and one economist, and Gary's very well known in the international business and entrepreneurship areas. Today, I'm going to try to focus in a little bit more on writing the introduction. And when I first started this research, people were saying, you're crazy, you can't write a 20-page paper or whatever on writing introductions unless you talk about every type of introduction. And I said, well, let me see. And then I wrote one paper for the JEECAR journal. It was maybe about 10, 12 pages, I guess, or whatever. And that was partly on the introduction and on the research question. And as I started writing these papers for Asia Pacific Journal Management and so forth, I realized I could probably write 20 pages on research questions, actually, just to help authors with that. But today, I'm just going to focus in on writing an introduction. And I'm going to skip or just go fast over a few slides that I covered a little bit on Tuesday, just to let you know this presentation, you can have this one also. It overlaps a little bit with Tuesday, but not completely. I go into a lot more detail here. Okay, good. That's slide 2 there, so we'll get started. And Nikolai, could you go one more slide? Yeah, next slide, please. One of the problems I see with papers as an editor and editor for now about 20 years in management and international business is papers tend to be very ambiguously framed. That means usually there's no research question. The positioning of the paper is unclear, or maybe it doesn't come out until way down in the paper. And as a result, what we see with many papers that have some interesting data and interesting approach are just kind of long lists of hypotheses, long lists of literature review, and they're not really contributing much to the literature, even if they're getting us significant results or whatever. And this starts very much with the research question and the introduction. Next slide, please. Next. So that's the paper I wrote in 2017 on introductions in the JEECAR journal. Please do get it. And I followed up in 2019 with another paper that expands. Okay, what I'd like to do, I don't want to go into the background of this research and the methodology because we don't have that much time. But what we've tried to do, myself and my co-authors that have worked on this topic, is that we've tried to examine good papers, very good papers in the top journals in management, international business, and occasionally in some allied fields like marketing, and mostly in the business areas, a little bit in sociology sometimes. And we've tried to describe how these papers are structured. In particular, I'm quite interested in how introductions are structured. And when I started doing this, people said, oh, you can't do this. Introductions are going to be much different. Well, they're not really across the disciplines, especially today. I think there's some sort of convergence a little bit because introductions have to convey the same type of information to everybody, especially the editors and the reviewers, so they want to continue reading your paper. And I've worked with economists, I've worked with finance people, and so forth, and they fight me a little bit on some of this stuff, but eventually we get our introductions looking kind of similar, I think, across disciplines. Not exactly the same. That might be an interesting study for me to look at later on. But in terms of introductions, again, management and international business is what I'll focus in on more, usually about 2 to 3 pages in length, about 5 to 7 paragraphs in length, as I mentioned the other day. Next slide, please. Okay, good. I've got a few slides on the research question. Nikolai, next slide, please. I'll just move ahead a little bit. Please try, I won't say a lot about research questions tonight, but please try to provide a clear and answerable research question, if possible, in the first sentence of the paper. It's a good discipline to have. Now later, as you get a little more creative and you want to start out with a little story or a little background or something, or read other papers and see how they do it, that's fine. But usually I tell, especially newer authors, try to discipline yourself to a research question and ask each other those things too. When you talk about research, say to people, what is your research question? What are you trying to ask and answer in this paper? And I'm afraid very, very often you will hear people say, well, I want to explore innovation in Eastern Europe, or I want to explore HR in China. Those aren't research questions, okay? That's exploring something, okay? That maybe you need to do an exploratory paper on that topic, but if it's a very well-researched topic, you probably don't want to explore it. You probably want to ask and answer something specifically, fairly narrowly about that topic, okay? Most of the time. There's some exceptions to this, okay? Phenomenology and so forth. Let's not pick on those things right now. We're kind of looking at vanilla empirical research. Next slide, please. Next, please. One more, that's Amy Cuddy. Some of you recognize her from her famous TED Talk. I just put a couple of quick examples on research questions. Amy Cuddy comes from micro areas, social psychology, of course, and she talked about how body language or nonverbal behavior affects others or affects ourselves. And in some of her research, she starts out a little bit coy. She talks about how body language affects the situation, but then she, after a little bit of, tiny bit of story, she gives her real research question was, can nonverbal communication or power posing affect me, myself, instead of the listener? And that's a very strong question that hadn't been asked that often. It had been studied, but not to the extent they did it or the way they did it. So a very interesting question. If you get a chance, just look at her TED Talk and listen to her research question and the way she sets it up. It's very good, and she does that in one of her papers also. She makes you think like she's going to talk about body language affecting the listener, but then she, after a little bit of story, she says, no, we're going to talk about how body language affects me, the speaker. Very good and subtle positioning of her paper. Interesting. Anyway, next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. Okay, let's go on. One more slide, I think. I'm trying to keep track of where we are. Okay, I'm going to get to this paper now in just a minute before I eat up too much time. This is an outstanding paper. Please try to pick it up from the internet. It's very easy to find. It's by Klaus Meyer and his colleagues, and Mike Pung is the fourth author. The other two guys are quite well known, I think economists. And the paper itself is called, hold on, I've got it here. It's called Institutions, Resources, and Entry Strategies in Emerging Markets. A very simply titled paper. It's a kind of a narrow empirical paper. It's from SMJ, Strategic Management Journal, 2009. It's in, and if you look up Klaus Meyer on Google Scholar Citations, this paper's right at the top. And if you click into it and click versions, there's the PDFs are all available inside. So please do get this paper, even if you're not that interested in entry strategies and internationalization strategies. It's a very, very well framed paper. Their research question is in the first sentence. And I've got the paper here. I've got partial page one on the slides, but the research question is, what determines or what factors determine foreign market entry strategies? And I talked about this on Tuesday. A very cleanly framed question. You know exactly what the paper's about, right? It's variables, and since it's a strategy paper, they're probably meso or macro variables. How do they affect or are associated with different choices about foreign market entry strategies, right? Greenfield, brownfield, wholly owned subsidiary, joint venture, some sort of strategic alliance. They have several choices there. Okay, I'm going to get to their introduction in just a second. There's a few more examples. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. Next slide. That's some overly broad questions I just talked about. Maybe Nikolai, next slide. I think let's go on. I'll try to get to their introduction. I'm sorry. Could you move that one more? I'm sorry. Could you continue? Maybe two more slides ahead. Excuse me for jumping. Move again. Yeah. One more, please. I'm sorry. Okay, good. I want to get to their introduction, spend some time on it. The slides we just skipped had some other examples of very good introductions that positioned the paper. But I want to talk specifically about that with Klaus Meyer's paper, because I think it's excellent. Nikolai, I'm sorry, can you go ahead again? One more, I'm sorry. I wish I could control this. And one more, please. I'm sorry. One more. Okay, good. Okay, back to the first page. Okay, back one, please. Okay, This paper, I want to, this slide and the next slide, which I think are slide 21 and 22 in my list, basically diagram what Klaus Meyer and his colleagues have done in this outstanding paper. This paper has been cited almost 2,000 times, which is excellent for kind of a narrow empirical paper on a fairly narrow topic. Not that pretty narrow, not super narrow. An important topic: internationalization strategies by firms, but fairly tight topic. And let's look at this. I'm going to go through it. I trust all of you can see this. Okay, this page 1. Nikolai, is that clear on your screen there? Can you see the first page? Okay, yes, okay, he's saying yes. Thank you very much. Okay, let's look at this. Forgive me, I'm going to actually try to diagram some of this paper here for you while we're talking. The next slide, which don't switch yet, outlines this. Okay, let's look at this. The first sentence says, what determines foreign market entry strategies? Okay, excellent. Right, they start out with a very clear research question. Now, make note of this, please. I've been an editor for 20 years, and I've probably reviewed at least 3,000 papers over that time for journals and for conferences, maybe more. I should keep track of all this stuff. If I was a good negotiator, I would keep track of everything, right? Okay, what determines foreign market entry strategies? Now, the mistake that many authors make, and I've done this before myself, is we want to rush ahead to our own topic right now. So sometimes people have a research question, and then they say, well, not much research has been done on this topic. They cite maybe one paper, and then they say, here's what I'm going to do. And then they give you 2 or 3 paragraphs in the introduction about their own study. Okay, now that's a mistake. Now this is very important, because if an editor or reviewer sees that, he or she will say, you didn't situate your paper in the past literature, and you didn't motivate the paper. They often use those terms. And when I was a doctoral student and a young scholar, I didn't know what that meant exactly, to situate. And okay, situate kind of, but or position, but then motivate your paper. I didn't know what the heck they were talking about. It's an important topic. I didn't know. Okay, well, let's see how Mike Pung and Klaus do this. Okay, after the research question, they say, to answer this question, most existing literature, I'm reading off the paper now, has focused on the characteristics of the entering firm. Okay, notice how they, before talking about their own topic, they bring in outside research, early research on this topic. Notice the key word, characteristics. This is, I've content analyzed this very carefully. It's very interesting. And I can promise you, Mike Pung, who wrote the introduction, writes this carefully. I've worked with Mike, and I've seen him working with his students. He is really a master at the introduction. If you don't know Mike's work, look him up sometimes. P-E-N-G, Mike Pung. Most of you know if you know international business. One of the top researchers and writers and professors in our field, certainly. Now, what determines foreign market entry? To answer this question, most existing literature has focused on the characteristics of the entering firm, in particular resources and capabilities. Okay, very early research on most topics deal with characteristics. Big firms, small firms, right? Small firms are innovative, big firms are not, right? That's what we thought for a long time. Small firms grow, big firms don't, or whatever, early entrepreneurship research, okay? So they go on in the first paragraph to talk about how resources and capabilities are important to direct a firm into a particular market using a particular internationalization method. Okay, that's fine. But if you continue in the paragraph, I'm sorry, it's a little small, but I'm going to keep trying to read it a little. While resources and capabilities are important, that's right in the middle of the paragraph. If you have this paper or you get it later, I would strongly suggest make a note or circle the word while. Okay, that's very common. Okay, what do I mean? Somebody says, here's my research question. Wait, what did other guys say about it? Okay, the early research looked at capabilities and resources, and that's fine, but you'll see a word like but, or however, or while. And what they're saying is this research was helpful, but it's not enough. Okay, very important. This step is missed more than almost any step that I can see when I review papers. And this is very careful and sharp writing, okay? So let's see what Mike says here. He says resources, but resources and capabilities are important. Recent work has suggested that strategies are moderated by the context. Okay, great. He's suggesting institutions, but he doesn't mention it yet. Okay, why? Because you don't need to give people everything at once. Okay, he's saying that maybe context is important. Okay, today that's obvious to us. 15 years ago when they wrote this paper, we're still debating about it. We still are. We're still trying to define institutions. Okay, second paragraph now says something about the context now. It says in particular, this is paragraph 2 now, it's the second column here. In particular, institutions, the rules of the game in the host economy shape the decision. And then there's macro level institutions and micro level institutions. That's nice. I tried to put that in my thesis 20 years ago, 25 years ago. My advisors told me no, you know, and I had this idea before Mike. I should have done it, but I listened to them, which was stupid. Okay, so macro institutions and micro institutions, and a lot of work has been done at the micro level in the early days in institutional economics, Williamson and other guys that were looking mostly at cost issues, you know, minimizing costs. You know, cost minimization is a reason that people make decisions in economics very often. Well, they don't say that as much anymore, but they certainly used to say that. Okay, so once again, you know, as a result, macro institutions have been placed into the background. If you look very carefully, and when you get this paper, look again, once again, in the middle of the paragraph, the word but or however appears. You know, it says institutions have been studied a little bit. However, it was mostly micro institutions. Okay, now you see what Mike's getting at. In paragraph 1, he says, resources and capabilities are important, but it's not enough. Context is important, okay? Paragraph 2, okay, what type of context? Institutions. But a lot of it's been micro, it's been cost oriented, and that's not enough, right? So paragraph 3 says, okay, what is enough? It says, however, a new generation of research, this is paragraph 3 now in column 2 right here, a new generation of research suggests that institutions are much more than background conditions and much more than micro level costs and so forth. Institutions have a direct effect on decisions. Okay, again, that sounds obvious to us in 2020. In 2006, 7, 8, when this stuff is being written, a lot more debate was still going on about that, and people were still trying to define institutions and then gather data for it. So Mike is saying, look, the early research institutions were in the background as moderators, or they were mostly micro, and they didn't deal with benefits. They talked about cost minimization. However, we think that the understanding of institutions is a direct effect, and also perhaps the manipulation of institutions has an effect on decisions and later on firm performance. So that's where he is on paragraph 3. Okay, and then he goes on at the rest of paragraph 3, and he restates his research question. And that's something I really encourage students to do. You've got your research question at the beginning. What determines foreign market entry strategies? Nothing about institutions, nothing about emerging economies. And now he really pulls out his real research question, his expanded one. Okay, so I call the first question kind of the mini question, like Amy Cuddy talking about body language, but not telling you too much. And then after some discussion, she says, this is what I'm really going to talk about. And this is what Mike does too, Mike Pung and Meyer, at the end of paragraph 3. If you can look or follow along on the slide, in the third column at the top, he says, given these institutional differences, okay, you can read about what he means there, but how do foreign firms adopt their entry strategies when entering emerging economies? Okay, great. Now he's added institutions, he's added emerging economies to his research question. Beautifully done, not as grand or interesting as Amy Cuddy's, question, but nicely done and nicely framed. And the beautiful thing about this is I know exactly I tell my students, this is the GPS of this paper, the position of the paper. Okay, it's about international entry strategies into emerging economies. It's also about institutions, partly, right? It's also about resources. Resources and institutions go together, but not as moderators and not as micro, but as kind of macro level institutions, direct effect. So you could map the position of this paper exactly. If you list out those key aspects of the paper, you know exactly where this paper is, right? It's an institutional paper, institutions as direct effect, macro, not micro, benefits will be discussed more than costs perhaps, and it's going into emerging economies, I believe into is the position. Okay, that is, wait, how many? 1, 2, that's the end of the third paragraph, right? I know the research question exactly. I know the other research in the area. And notice they didn't go into detail. They didn't say, you know, John in 2001 studied 500 whatever and he got this. Don't put that in the introduction, usually not. You want to just position the paper. Don't start going into the details. I think one of our speakers on Tuesday said that very well, where he said, don't start giving too long of a history in your introduction, right? Okay, paragraph 4 now. And again, I go through this very carefully because I watch Mike Pun. I learned from him a lot from him, working with him many times, on how he actually does this. He diagrams these things. Paragraph 1 is the research question, followed by the early research. And then the word but is there. He writes it on the board. He circles it. He says, why is this not enough? Paragraph 2 tried to fix paragraph 1's problems, but it's not enough, right? And sometimes you get more than 2 paragraphs. You might get 3 or 4 doing that, but not too much. You can't go into too much detail in the introduction, but you're really positioning your paper and motivating it. So people are saying, ha, this is why the paper's needed. Now I see, right? Imagine if Mike had just said, internationalization strategies are important. We're going to explore them. Emerging economies are important. We're going to explore them. And now here's our paper, right? And here's our data, right? I mean, right? You look at it, you say, well, that's great. It's important. You know, teach your readers about the paper. You know, teach them why this is important to learn about. Okay. And you know, and this is difficult when especially when you're a new scholar, because you're thinking, this is an important topic. Internationalization strategies from Eastern Europe out to some other developed countries, whatever, is very important. Yes, it is. But you have to position these things carefully for the editors and reviewers in our field. Maybe we're a little too picky. We could debate that later on. But this is the type of structure that they usually like to see, unless it's really exploratory or something. Okay, let me go on here. Let's see, we're still doing okay on time, but I'll try to finish. Okay, paragraph 4 says, focusing on this key question, this is in the 3rd column now, we argue that institutional development, okay, now what is he doing here? He's presenting his own main hypothesis here. Okay, in other words, he waited until paragraph 4. A lot of times in papers, not so good papers, I mean, good data, but not well written, people will put that too soon at the beginning. They'll say, this is what I want to study, you know? And so Mike has positioned his paper very carefully and motivated it, the reason that it's needed. So he says, focusing on this key question now, we argue institutional development, you know, and he's got to define institutions, so he's starting to suggest it. And investors' need for resources, okay, no surprise. A lot of times firms will look for a joint venture partner somewhere, Africa or maybe, or, you know, where they have resources or what have you. You know, help to impact those choices. And then this is also important, and look for this trick here. This is why I love this exemplary paper. In the middle of paragraph 4, notice what he says here. He says, this article thus responds to the call issued by other authors, often in this particular journal, SMJ, for more integration between institutions and the resource-based view. And we achieve this integration and so forth. If you just read that very carefully, and then he gives a little bit more detail there. So he's further motivating the paper by saying, here's our question, this is why it was needed, but also previous authors in this journal told us to do this, to try to integrate something or study institutions better or whatever. There's an old saying in Greek, the Greek philosophers used to say, people will seldom argue against themselves, right? It's a classic saying in Greek. I won't say it in Greek, I can't pronounce it, but people seldom argue against themselves. In other words, you're reminding the editor, perhaps the reviewers, that this question came up in future research in earlier papers, and now we're responding to that call. A very subtle but smart thing to do in your introduction if you can. Okay, end of paragraph 4. Paragraph 5. We test our hypotheses. This is in column 3 now, 2/3 of the way down. We test our hypotheses by integrating data from some countries, India, Egypt, South Africa. Very interesting, right? Seldom saw data from these countries in those days, even today, really. Vietnam, not so very common. These emerging economies are selected because of something. Now, what is that 5th paragraph? I call that the mini methods section. Okay, so this question came up on Tuesday. One person said, but will the journal allow you to talk about methods in the introduction? I think it's okay unless they never do it in the journal that you're submitting to. Otherwise, you can spend 1 paragraph explaining your method. What kind of paper is this? Is it a time series or longitudinal? Not exactly the same thing, right? But or is it some sort of survey design? Is it cross-sectional? Is it comparative case? What type of paper is it? Is it conceptual or something? I mean, it's not empirical, but yet you're going to still make your case and do some interviews and so forth. So tell people about that. It's easy. I don't like to be surprised. I'm flipping the pages of the paper, trying to figure out what type of paper is this. I can't even find the hypotheses, but yet he's got a big methods section, and what is he doing here? Don't surprise and confuse your readers, please. Make it really clear. Okay, paragraph 6, and I think it's the 6th paragraph here. Overall, this is the bottom of the 3rd column. Overall, this article makes 3 contributions. Again, I talked about this on Tuesday. Please do not neglect this. This should be the last paragraph of your introduction most of the time. There's some exceptions to this. It depends on how complex your paper is and all. But usually don't bother with saying, first we do this, second we do this, third. Forget that. If you've organized your introduction okay, finish with contributions, okay? A long contribution paragraph. Now you will repeat these in the discussion section, okay? And if you get this paper, look what Mike does in the discussion section. Back at the end of the paper, he starts out with contributions. And 1 contribution, 1 paragraph, but that's in the discussion. In the introduction, Mike has a very kind of a long, oversized paragraph here. And he says, overall, this article makes 3 contributions, okay? And you can tell us something about your contributions. One of the contributions is empirical. We're studying South Africa, Egypt, and so forth, and nobody has done that before. So some of your research in Eastern Europe and some of the Eastern European countries that have seldom been in the, say, mainstream management English language literature, tell people about that. Say we've got comparative stuff from Slovakia and the Czech Republic, and they used to be one country and they're separated, but isn't that interesting to compare the two? I don't know. But I mean, that could be an interesting empirical contribution. He also has a couple of theory contributions here. When you have a contribution, and I've written 1 short paper on this, and I'm going to do more, but please contribute to a specific theory. Please do not contribute to the literature. Please do not add to the literature. Please do not, contribute more. A contribution, read very carefully what Mike has written here, but a contribution is, this is what we found quickly, and this is what it means. What do we know now? about theory. Our model is fixed, it's changed. We've added a new mediator, like Amy Cuddy adds a new mediator in her study. What's a mediator? It's the mechanism on how something works, right? A causes B, but wait a minute, A causes the mediator and the mediator causes B. That is usually considered a theory contribution. Okay, so you specify your contribution, theory, and so forth. Once again, please don't contribute to the literature. Okay, and one other thing too, with contributions are not what you did. Okay, if you say we went to Malaysia and surveyed 5,000 people and that's how we're contributing, no. Okay, that might be an empirical contribution, but you need to explain that. Say we got data from Malaysia, from the villages in Malaysia, and that's unusual. That's an unusual sample. Yes, absolutely. I think that is a contribution. But don't just say our contribution is we surveyed people in Malaysia. What you did is not a contribution. It's got to be what you found and what it means. Okay, and please tell people that. Be a good teacher, all right? A lot of people are pretty good researchers, they're terrible teachers, so, teach us these things. Nikolai, I know I'm running out of time. So let me just wrap up here. Good, there's a little bit more in the introduction. Next slide, please. I'll just try to conclude here. Apologies for going so fast. For those of you who get the presentation, I structured this, and this appears in a paper 2019, I think, with Linda Wong, I think it is, and it's in one of the educational journals. It's easy to find if you look my name up on Google Scholar, and look under the recent papers. Click the year, and just look at the papers by year. But I've tried to diagram those paragraphs. It's kind of an average introduction, 6 paragraphs. What does each paragraph do? The beauty of doing this, and the reason I emphasize this so much, is that's your paper. It's all there. The literature review is essentially the first 2 paragraphs that describe the position of your paper and suggest the motivation for your paper or the reason for it. And you expand that, but that's your literature review. And then the 3rd paragraph restates the hypotheses, gives a little background, and then goes, gives a general hypothesis, little background. That would be your hypothesis section, or it would suggest it. And then after that is the methods section. Okay, no results. Some people give a little bit of results in the introduction. I don't really mind. I think you can do a little bit of that, but don't go into any detail. And then finally the contributions, which are the discussion section. So that's almost your whole paper. So sometimes people say, oh, I can't write a 30-page paper. How do you do it? What goes where? And then I see a lot of repetition in the paper. I say, if you get this introduction right, that's your paper. So work hard on that and talk to people or talk to your colleagues and make sure they understand it. Try to fill in those blanks. Research question, past research, but it's not enough. Then some other guys tried to fix the but they didn't do enough. And maybe some other guys, and now here's what I can do that's going to fix things or at least move the research along. It's going to define institutions better, give us some more data and so forth. Okay, so really put a lot of effort into your introductions, and most editors will tell you. AMJ did a series of Meet the Editors articles back in 2011-12, and when I was editor of APJM, Asia Pacific Journal Manager, I also did that. In fact, I did it before them. Maybe they got the idea from me, I don't know. But we were all talking about what editors are looking for, what reviewers, and AMJ, Academy of Management Journal, had 7 very nice short articles about these things. They spent quite a bit of time on introductions, research questions, and contributions. They did 7 articles, and I think 3 or 4 of them dealt in some way with the introduction. So an enormously important topic. And I guess I've got to stop there, Nikolai. That's probably about 45, right? Okay, so I'll take any questions or, I'll stop there. I probably talked too much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for your awesome presentation. People were so intrigued with your speech that instead of asking questions, they probably decided to contact you directly in the future. And that's what many people ask about the presentations. Yes, as I mentioned, the beginning presentation will be delivered at the end, because we still want to share this and want to make you and your students better researchers. One question that arrived, and I would like to mention, came from Professor Zidane. She's asking about the Journal of Eastern Europe. It will be presented more in greater detail by Dr. Charlotte, Deputy Editor, Charlotte Davis. However, a question was specifically, do we publish articles or research outside of the scope of geographic Eastern Europe and Central Asia? I would say predominantly not, because it's our mission to do the research in this region, and we would like to stay focused. However, if you have something to compare, for example, of Kazakhstan and Nigeria in the oil sector or something like this, we definitely would go and publish this, because this is what is important today. Again, Dr. Davis, thank you so much for your presentation. We have to move forward to the next. Oh, I'll just go quickly through your many other slides, and thank you. You're close to the end, and thank you so much. And yeah, people will have all this a complete set of both your presentations, and we have to move to the next presenter. Thank you again. And here's my dear colleague, Dr. James Hagen. Before I do the introduction, I say I was honored to teach at the Hamline University here in Minnesota, St. Paul, with Dr. Hagen for almost 10 years, I should say, and it was my pleasure being your colleague, Dr. Hagen. And I would like to mention that you are today Professor Emeritus at the Global Marketing Strategy at Hamline University. And one other thing important to mention, that you are a scholar who travels constantly to Japan and teaching in Japan and Italy. And before joining Hamline University here in the US, you was a Cornell University professor. However, focus today is on case studies, and Dr. Hagen qualitative articles include several case studies. The most important is Ben and Jared in Japan, been in the publication for over 20 years, and you will talk today about this. However, I also want to mention that you are on our editorial board, and we're happy to have you. And you've been nominated multiple times as a best paper judge by Association of Japanese Business Studies. Okay, and your microphone today, please present on qualitative research, developing, writing case studies. Okay. Dr. Hagen, can you hear? We cannot hear you, but can you?
Can you hear? Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, okay, thanks. And we can start some slides, Nikolai. I don't see them on my screen. There, thanks. I want to thank you so much, Professor Megitz and my co-presenters and participants. I am a participant too. We're always learning, and I've just been learning a lot on Tuesday, and just from Professor Ahlstrom just now. It never ends, you know. I was trying to figure this out and never quite get there. And I think Professor Megitz perhaps asked me to do this because he has taught a case study that I wrote several times. So he knows that I have been in the case writing business and written some other papers that are qualitative. Really, there's a lot of people to thank for, besides all of us that are here today, and that's my previous institutions that have one way or another allowed me to write in a qualitative sense, whether they intended to initially or not. They tolerated it. And that's from Minnesota, Illinois, Cornell, and Hamline, where I'm emeritus status currently. And then also the academic associations, where I just reviewed just inordinate numbers of papers and judged best paper competitions, and learned from the papers that I read. It's a huge pleasure to read good papers. And as we all know, when you read papers that are not so well written, it reminds you of how important it is to write well. The colleagues and co-authors, very little of what I've done has been entirely by myself, either with some kind of research assistant, an advisor, a colleague that I bounce ideas off of. I've just listed some of the names of people that fit into that category. For qualitative research, for case studies, the other big category of people we thank is our informants. That is, we are talking to people, typically practitioners in the business world, and they are taking their very valuable time to talk with me. They're not just taking their time, they're putting their trust in me that I will represent them correctly and not cause them problems. And I cannot tell you how important it is to have good informants that you're working with and keep their trust. So case study writing, pretty easy, isn't it? You know, it's just writing stories. It's kind of like writing to your mom or something. It's, well, yes and no. Good news is that case writing, it can be very, very interesting to you as a writer and to many of your audience members. And the audience can be surprisingly broad for a good case writing, including practitioners in the working world that actually learn from what you're writing besides academics. A case study can be a standalone article in a journal. It can be a monograph, such as something you would buy through Harvard Business Review or Ivy or any one of the case publishers. Or cases can be parts of theory papers, conceptual papers as well. That is, there's a large range of places where case work is useful. Now, the bad news, it's hard. It's not easy. Writing cases is not the fallback. Say, well, I don't know, I'm not smart enough to write a good empirical piece. I'm not smart enough to do the particular structural equations model that my boss would really like me to do. I'll just settle for case writing. No, this is not something you settle for. You better embrace it with a certain amount of gusto and enthusiasm and realize that it can be extremely challenging. That is, for one thing, you have to have all of the things that Professor Ahlstrom just talked about. You have to have a point, and then you have to frame it well, and you have to write it in a particularly engaging manner, because in many cases, you're not writing to the highest level scholars that have done the prior research. You might be writing to a more general audience. Other thing is case studies are not for every place. They're not, a lot of journals would not accept them. A lot of tenure committees would not accept them as legitimate research. They'd say, well, no, at this university, you know, we totally expect you to do more large data set type research. So the question is, you want to make sure that whatever you're trying to do in terms of advancing your position in getting published or a promotion or tenure, that you are consistent with whatever their objectives are. So anyway, so is it easy, something you just do as a default? If you can't do anything else, no. It's something that you set out to do well and you do it right, and you can have good success with it and have a lot of fun. Next, please, Nikolai.
Before we go to the next slide, Professor Hagen, I have a question to you that just an example. A few days ago, I had a discussion with my colleagues in Ukraine and about the case studies, and they said, oh, why it's important to have, we never use the case studies in our MBA program. I know they're very popular here in the United States. Can you just a little bit, just stop if you have, maybe you have it later, I don't know, to discuss the value of case studies in MBA, especially in MBA education?
Well, not everybody thinks they're as valuable as everyone else does. For example, Harvard Business MBA program really thinks a lot of case studies as a method for getting people to be exposed to situations they may encounter and ideas for how to address business dilemmas or challenges or opportunities. There are other universities that don't regard them as valuable. So in my particular case, I've done a lot of MBA teaching, and it's, as you mentioned before, it's been all over the place. So I do this in Japan and Italy, Argentina, Hungary, Mexico, Korea. In fact, some of you who are listening, if you would like to invite me, come on, I'd love to do this. I'd like to go visit new audiences and present these things. For the most part, for MBA type courses, the MBAs are typically, they have been students that have had some business experience, and they like to be able to relate whatever theory they're learning to practice very quickly. And case studies are a very good way to do that. If they're written well, you can pull in some theory that they've been studying in their economics or strategy or OB courses and show how it could be applied in a real world situation. So it actually supports the other learning they're doing and it tends to be quite popular with MBA students. Is that okay? All right, I'll take that as a yes. So here's the deal. And this is where it was so much fun listening to Professor Alsop. How do you start the process of writing a case? Well, have a point, have a point to make, and have an audience you're trying to address. Start with that. Like, why am I even thinking about writing this paper? And never forget that. You may change the point as you go along, or you may find new angles that you didn't think of, and you may find new audiences. You may find that you started off addressing, in my case, once as a transaction cost economics academic discipline area, and then I find that I'm getting hundreds of citations in journals that are very well regarded, that are not economics. So anyway, it's good to be in mind of what your audience is. Then, if it's a case study, you're basically telling a story. Be aware of an interesting story that may illustrate your point. That is something that's going on in the real world. The cases I write are real, they're not hypothetical. You could, in theory, just have a totally fictional case study. I've never done that, but that would be conceivable. It's much easier to stay grounded in real stories, of which there are plenty. Make sure you have access to the information you need so that you can get the information and publish it. That is, you're going to need permission from your informants to publish. You don't want anyone to be surprised by what you said about their business or about their decision making. So you got to stay on board with them. If you don't have access to people in the practitioner world, then this may not be the best line of research writing for you to do. Develop a plan for getting your story to the audience. That is, identify target journals. Some journals like these things, others don't. And are you writing primarily as a device for teaching? Is this going to be used for teaching MBA students? How is it going to get out? So that helps you be mindful of your audience and how best to reach them. Say you're thinking, well, geez, I think it might be good, for just pick any journal, a strategic management journal. Well, if you think so, go back and make sure you've read their editorial standards and a few articles there and see if this is at all consistent with you think something their editors and reviewers would like before you start targeting toward a specific journal. But anyway, have that in mind. You might change your mind as you go along about which journals you're going to target. You might target multiple journals, but at least have something in mind. Yeah, next, please, Nikolai. Let me give you an example. This is the case study I wrote some time ago called the Cherix decision and Alliance for Export. These examples, I just have a few examples. You can find them online if you want. But anyway, so here's the question that started this. How can small food processing companies access foreign markets to increase U.S. food exports? I had a big fellowship from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, so they really wanted me to ground my research in something that had to do with food or agriculture. And then also I was interested in foreign market entry strategies, which I studied. So I thought, okay, this kind of scratches all those itches at once. So anyway, I knew this was a big question that was lingering out there. I'd hear it both from practitioners and academicians. So I had some background. So again, we're starting with my background, my access to resources. I'd lived in Japan, and I knew a little bit about exporting to that market. I actually did some of that myself in more of a consulting type capacity. Also, I grew up in the Midwest of the United States working on cherry farms for years. I knew how difficult the market structure for cherries is. Cherries, the fruit. One thing, they're perishable, very, very perishable. Another thing, they have pits, which makes them a problematic thing for for lawsuits when you're selling cherry pies and people break their teeth on the cherry pits. There are a lot of specific reasons why marketing cherries is difficult. So I knew this. I just happened to know that from my high school working days and college summer jobs. So anyway, I asked around to people in the cherry business that I was familiar with, and I found that there was a possible joint venture being talked about to market cherries to Japan. Aha, this sounds good. This is something I can really get my teeth into and enjoy studying. So I wrote a case study about preparing an export trading company to market cherries to Japan. It was interesting because there was a new law in the United States that allowed agricultural trading companies to be formed and then get around typical antitrust laws for price fixing and other things. And this is going to be one of the first cases of this laws being applied. So anyway, I identified issues in how do you form such a joint venture? And then I thought, well, okay, I had an audience. I knew people wanted to know about this, and I knew some places where I could get it published. Next, please. Nikolai, next slide, please. So anyway, this case study, I refined the question. Here's how I came up with it. It said, how do 4 independent small food processors form trust to co-brand and co-market, testing a new export law and a very difficult market? Japan is difficult to export to, especially was at that time. Notice the question is, I started with small food processors in Michigan, the state of Michigan. I knew they didn't trust each other. There's very little trust. And I thought, well, gosh, they have to really trust. How are they going to form trust? This is my first start of looking at trust, which became an area of research later on. So my focus was, so let's look at the perspective of each partner. So I interviewed all 4 partners about their self-interest and risk as they considered the joint venture. I call this a Rashomon style story. Rashomon is a famous movie, and it's basically a Japanese story about 4 different witnesses to a murder and how everyone brings their own perspective. So I brought 4 different perspectives to forming such a joint venture and what their individual needs were and how they developed a trust relationship. Next, please. So first, I recorded and transcribed all my interviews. It's a lot of work. I got written permission from all the informants. Were there other informants that I could not get permission from? Yeah, I couldn't use them. I had to give assurance that I could keep their secrets, because sometimes you get talking with them and they say things, oh, this is not, they say it's off the record, but just for your background, you can know this. I have to make sure each informant is getting something out of this. That is, they have to get something out. Everyone has to benefit by my working with them. And then you have to work really hard and fast before they die, or they get cold feet, or the story is stale, or, keep going. Writing, what's the most efficient way to tell the story? What are the learning points? What will make people enjoy studying this? Then here's what I recommend for almost any writing. Can I explain this story to a layperson? That is, to someone that's not an academician, and make it interesting. Could I explain this to an academician? Could I explain it to my grandma? You ought to be able to explain things to anybody. Now, here's a warning I have for you. I do this for fun, and I do it to satisfy my curiosity. So I love this. If you're not curious enough to notice strange things and want to understand them, it may be hard to come up with good research ideas, and then maybe hard to write. Thanks. Next slide, please. So another case I wrote is called Trust. It's not really a case. It's an article that was in AM, Academy of Management Review, is about trust. And motivation for that also came out of some my doctoral studies about transaction cost economics. And I couldn't understand transaction cost economics when it applied to forming partnerships to enter foreign markets. This, again, teed off of my case about ShareX. Japan was called a high trust culture. And it was like, I'd lived in Japan. I said, I don't understand where this high trust comes from. Yeah, in some cases there's a lot of trust, in other cases there is not. So I thought, I don't know, this literature is not making sense to me. I want to understand it better. Next, please. Next, please. So this paper I wrote, is trying to merge a couple disciplines, economics and psychology. I don't recommend that generally because no one likes you going out of your discipline, so it's a risky strategy. But anyway, again, I was 40 years old when I started my doctoral studies, okay? So I've been in business for a long time, and things had better be framed in practical terms for me, and I wanted to really understand. I was going to school because I was curious, and so that's kind of some background for me. So I took more risk than necessarily maybe is a good idea. Anyway, the question was trust. So my co-author and I, another doctoral student, did a lot of academic research trying to understand transaction cost economics and trust better. And then I learned a lot, read more about, okay, what's been published already. So there's a lot of background research on this. We really wanted to be grounded in that. Anyway, so we came up with a paper about how trust is formed. And it said institutional sanctions matter. It basically was saying that now Japan is not a high trust country except for the mechanisms that make trust possible. So that's where we went with that. It became very well cited. It's still getting cited a lot, and it's in a lot of disciplines. So what it was a lot of theory and a lot of case examples from Japan. So anyway, other things, another area I was interested in was food. Again, I'm still there. I'm still interested in Japan. So I wanted to write a case study for a class I was teaching. And I had heard about Ben & Jerry's, an ice cream company. We can go to the next slide, I guess. That's Ben & Jerry. These two guys started an ice cream company. That's their ice cream. They were not doing very well in the 90s, and they were thinking of expanding to Japan. I had access to the CEO, and I said, well, let's talk about that decision. How do you decide how to expand to Japan, and if you do that? So I prepared this with a particular point of just using it in my class. As a class at Cornell University, and it was about 600 students, and I had to kind of keep them engaged and come up with new material. It turned out that the case I wrote became popular and was published, and that's what Nikolai was referring to, is it kept winning one of the top 10 most published cases, especially in foreign market entry. But anyway, it was written for a particular purpose. And then it involved permission from the CEO and his introduction to interview a lot of people in the US and Japan. It's a lot of fun. So I just boiled it down to, you can flip slides, please. Slides, please. So I just came down, I just said, okay, the purpose for this one is for my class. How can I assign this to students? I say, I'll present some information. You don't have to do any outside research. Come up with one of these recommendations. Should we not enter Japan at this time? Should we enter Japan by partnering with 7-Eleven, a company, a retailer? Should we enter it with a company called Yamada? I gave a lot of background information, said, you tell me what to do. There's no correct answer, but I can still evaluate the papers based on their arguments. So anyway, that was it. It was very, very simple, objective, and anyway, it worked pretty well. Next slide, please.
A question before I go to next slide. It just came. How long should be an average case study for average business school?
Oh, I don't know. I teach other people's case studies and do my own. Sometimes I'll even make the students do all the background information. So the case study is really just one page and they have to do research. I'd say for the most part, they typically tend to be sort of in that 15 to 20 page range, but there's no answer. As Julian Schuster said the other day, don't feel too constrained by recipes to this. It depends on what the story is you're telling and how you're telling it. But I make it as short as possible that can convey the information you need to convey. That's what I'd say. So I did this. I say any answer is possible. I had one student, I gave a C to his answer. I said he made a recommendation and he explained why. I gave him a C. I just told you that any of those three answers is okay. And he complained to me and he said, how can you give me a C? I said, well, you didn't explain it very well. And he said, well, what do you mean? I submitted the answer to the case. I said, well, what do you mean? I bought the answer online. It's online. The answers to case studies, to the Hagen case study about Ben & Jerry's. I paid $50 to get the correct answer. That's what I gave you. I deserve an A. So I said, well, okay, first off, that was a bad purchase decision, and that was a C answer that you bought. So that's the primary problem. Now, if you want to just talk about your plagiarism, that's a whole other issue, but I want you to understand why that was a bad answer that you bought, because you were not explaining how you came up with it. Anyways, that was a ton of fun. Let's go to the next slide. So here's the things. Have a point, build on what is known of the industry and the theory, write efficiently and engagingly. Keep very good records of your source information. People say to me all the time in business classes, especially undergrads, well, I don't know, how do I write academically? Or sometimes PhDs will do this. How is academic writing than different writing? I say, it's not different. Every journal has its standards, but write as short as you can to get your point out. Have respect for the author is the main thing, and write with as few words as possible. And then, don't just stick with that. As Gertrude said, many people have said when they wrote letters to other people or wrote articles, they apologized and they said, I'm sorry, I didn't have time to write less. Anyways, respecting the reader is the idea. Consider your publication targets. Anyway, lots of questions you might have. Anything is fair game, but I'm always curious about what your favorite experiences have been, and what contributions you're thinking you might be able to make through case studies. Anyway, again, I learned from this immensely, and I just love engaging with you all. So thanks very much for the conversation. Thank you, Nikolai.
One other thing I would like to bring to this discussion when you're presenting case, to refer to our experience, in my experience, when we initiated to write a case on the target entry to Canada. And at that time, this is what my point is, that we should not, when writing case study, we shouldn't be writing some fictional story. It has to be a real story, then it's become valid. However, it's not easy because we were not, I personally at that time was a target employee as well, target corporation. I could not manage to get permission from target corporation to obtain the access to a lot of data, because many corporations keep this as a trade secret.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, that case would be a phenomenal case, because as we know, Target failed entering Canada. Maybe at that time, CEO of Target predicted that it would be a failing case, and they didn't want us to publish that stuff.
I think that's right. And I have other cases that I have tried to start and explored, and I could not get permission, so I did not pursue them. I had an excellent case about Uniqlo, a Japanese retail company, but could not get permission from the chairman of the board, and thought, no, this would not be good without that permission. So yeah, there's some risk to that. Yeah, avoid investing too much time before you feel confident that you can complete the task and get permission.
Thank you. And now it's time to move to next presenter. And the next presenter is a representative of Eastern European region. And the reason, here's Dr. Inna Neskorodeva. Dr. Inna Neskorodeva is Associate Professor of the Kharkiv National University and School of Business in Ukraine. She is actively publishing and cooperating with various academic journals. And currently, she's Associate Professor and Associate Editor of Journal of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. One other thing I would like to bring, that it's so critical for us to have a Dr. Neskorodeva presenting today, because she will be touching specifically on research done and performed by academia in Eastern European region. This is the focus of our journal, and she'll have a lot of interesting data to share with us, and that would exactly prove for me personally why our journals is so essential for the academia and researchers in this region. Dr. Inna, please turn on your microphone, and you are with us. Please start your presentation. But I assume yes, now we can hear you. Go
Thank
ahead.
you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Megats. I'm happy to be here, and I would like to thank the distinguished organizer of this workshop, to Professor Megats, for invitation, and I'm very proud to be part of this event, and I would like to greet the distinguished speaker of this workshop and numerous participants who have shown interest in this event. My report will be devoted to the problem of publication activities in the post-Soviet country. Why I would like to raise this topic could be explained by the fact that the scientists of this country, or from this country, are not competitiveness today in comparison, for example, European and American scientific community. The reason for this cannot be explained by the personal characteristic of scientists of this country, but primarily due to the institutional condition in which they live and work. The majority of scientists of this country publish their articles with the aim intending to save their work in the university, but not to develop their scientific career. While university, more than 90% of published articles are usually provided by university staff in this country. But why do they need to publish research articles? Look at the please slide item 1. The main goal of publication activities, this is develop a scientific career. Your result and idea must be available to other scientists, must be appreciated and recognized by the international scientific community. To publish research articles, to obtain, give the possibility to obtain grant money and promote the development of science and exchange scientific achievement globally. But please slide point item 2. Let's go to slide where we could look at the statistical data about publication activity of post-Soviet country, and you can note a fairly low level of publication activity from the author from this country in 2090. Information was aggregated using the data from Imega Journal and country. This is the actual information. If you can see and note, the Russian is the leader in the number of published articles in 2090 and number of citation among the post-Soviet country. But Russian is behind a lot such leaders in the number of scientific publications as the United States, Great Britain, Canada, Japan, France, etc. But it should be noted that countries such as the Netherlands, Sweden, Poland, Switzerland were characterized by a smaller volume of scientific publication in comparison to Russian. But again, statistics show that the level of citation of article by Russian scientists was significantly lower than in the listed country. Please slide item 3, Dr. Megan.
Dr. Skordea, before we move to next slide, I would like to bring attention to our listeners, participants, in regards to Russia, for example. They are very high, but it's important to bring your attention to this, that majority of articles that were published are not in the field of economics. They are in the field of science, of chemical industries, engineering, and physics, etc. In this big bars that you see, the business sector is less than a quarter.
Yes, it is not interesting for Russian research. I don't know why. Of course, maybe they have a great economic. I don't know. Can I continue? The current situation about the problems with the citation from this country can be explained by the lower level of citation per research articles from the post-Soviet post-Soviet camp. Today, this is indicators, if you can see, is almost 2 times lower than the world average. At the same time, scientific publication of the post-Soviet country characterized by one of the highest levels of self-citation around the Europe, especially with regards to Russian research. At the same time, you can see this country, the author from this country, they had a steady trend towards an increase in the numbers of scientific publication, especially with regard to the central and western region of Asia. During the period 1996-2019, the number of scientific publications has increased by almost 6 times. But the situation has decreased by half, almost by 50%. This indicates lower quality and relevance of scientific publication, published articles of this country, post-Soviet country. Of course, the question arises why. Please, slide item 4. I tried on this slide, I tried to summarize the system of external institutional facts of the ineffectiveness of publication activity in the post-Soviet countries. First of all, this is because of traditional university in this country has always been exclusively educational institutions. It's very, very big problems and not research center. Due to preservation of the state dominance in the market of higher education service, more than 90% are state university. This introduces some very significant specificity to their management, not aimed to form their motivation to develop science. It's a problem. In the last decade, many scientists from the post-Soviet country are trying to increase their position on the scientific global market, but it's too difficult because their national education system had served only domestic needs and was closed from foreign influence. In comparison, European country and America, where many universities already have the great authority, scientific authority, and long traditional. Please slide item 4. The main external institutional factor of the ineffectiveness of the publication activity in the post-Soviet country, this is the low level of funding for science. You can see that it is not more than 1% of GPD behind Estonia. Even Poland, yes, they have more expenditures to science. The current situation is aggravated by the lack of demand for the result of fundamental research by business and real production. Please slide item. On this slide, I try to accumulate the main internal institutional factors of ineffectiveness publication activities in the post-Soviet country. The main factors, internal institutional factors, this is a lack of strict quality requirements. As for me, this is one of the key factors of effectiveness because I told and I explained that this country, yes, the author of this country, publication activity has the problems of fewness, yes, but it is not a big problem. A bigger problem, this is the quality of the published articles. For example, in many of these countries, many of the countries from the Central and Western, as Eastern Europe, the supreme attestation of a commission of this country has established requirements for the number of articles published in the international databases, like a Scopus or WOS. It takes usually 1 and 2 articles for getting academic degree, but did not set up any requirements for the journal. For example, in European country, 5-10 articles in prestigious, highly citation journal are required to obtain an academic degree. There are no hard requirements, no motivation or necessity. Next significant inter-institutional factors. This is the huge workload for teachers with educational, methodological, and organizational work in this country. The obligatory teaching load is about 600 classroom hours. Comparison Europe and America, it's about 180 hours. It's very big gap. And the last, what I wanted to point to, one of the main internal factors of ineffectiveness of publication activity in the post-Soviet country. This is not knowing the English language. Last time on the section 1, it was discussed by the professor from Poland, more detailed, but I wanted to tell that it's very big problems because scientific from the post-Soviet country cannot to explain adequate their novelty, their originality. They cannot work with the team of journals. They cannot to be part of the global academic community. And if you look at the slide of 6, yes, I should present some example, some facts, yes, that, for example, out 210,000 articles about healthcare, what have been indexed in the Science Citation Index expanded, they based on the Web of Science, 96.5% of the articles was published in the English and only 3.5% in non-English. Of course, not knowing the English language caused many limitations in the research activity of the scientists from the post-Soviet country. And like a resume, I would like to note that external and internal institutional factors of ineffectiveness publication activity in the countries of the post-Soviet space have determined the consequences, like a weak correlation between the number of published research articles and their quality. And the elimination of this condition could be improve the efficiency of publication activity in the University of post-Soviet country and quality their articles. My report is over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nestorodeva. For the reason the English language definitely is, we understand this issue, and one of the way to help a publisher from region, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, we offer as a publishing agency and journal, we offer English language editorial service. That is definitely some fee applies, but we help and can help and helping others with this issue. Again, thank you. We have to move forward to next. Our presenter is next presenter is Dr. Aselbek Nurgabdishev from Kazakhstan. It's actually a big honor for me to have Dr. Aselbek presenting today, because we met him a few weeks ago, probably now months ago, at the AIB conference online that took place this year, AIB 2020. And Dr. Aselbek Nurgabdishev is a research professor, and it's our big honor to learn from his experience. What's interesting, he is one of few from Kazakhstan who graduated in studied a lot abroad and graduated with his PhD from London University, and he has many other achievements in his academic career, and he probably will tell more about himself today. But his presentation today is on a topic of literature review in the business management. Okay, your microphone, you're ready. Please start your presentation, Dr.
Good morning, dear friends from the West, and good evening, dear colleagues from the East. Thank you, Nicola, for this honor. I'm happy to present the presentation today. Nikolai, can we go back to the slide? Yeah, just a couple of words about literature review and what's happening in Central Asia and in Kazakhstan, especially in the case of research. In a really in a good manner, explained what's happening in the post-Soviet unions, especially in the case of business management research. But I'm an optimist. I feel that this current situation will change because the was changed in 10 years ago when our government has changed the postgraduate research degree from 2 to 1. It was a candidate of science and doctor of science before, now it's only PhD. And nearly 5 years ago, some smart guys at the administration of universities, some universities, understand that our researchers are not competitive. It's hard for them to publish in top journals in the West. So they decided to change the research philosophy and the research methods taught before. And now, especially for last 5 years, more and more universities are changing their research philosophy and especially focusing on research methods. And today I will explain, my presentation will be focused more on PhD students and early career researchers. And especially literature review is important for our PhD students. Why? Because they are not passing, they don't learn about how to do research during their bachelor degree, and most of them don't care about that at master degree. And when they came their PhD, when they start their PhD degree, they must find a topic, they must find the area, and they must do some literature review, which is the fundamentals of research, and that's happening in a very quick time. They must do everything in 2 months, and that is a big problem and main challenge for our PhD students. And today I will talk about what kind of maps is beneficial and useful for them to use during their literature review. As you can see from the research process, by selection of topic and finding a problem, and after that reviewing the literature, especially in that area, is the main research process, and that's the main challenge at the starting of that process. Let's pass to the next slide, Nikolai, please. So how to conduct a literature review? Of course, main issue is identifying a topic, finding a source of literature, because only a limited number of universities has access to Web of Science and Scopus, and now more and more universities are trying to buy the license. So some problems can happen with the source of literature. But if our main research universities, they have their access, and third stage is read the literature. After that, analyzing literature is coming. Assembling and organizing and writing literature is the last steps. But today we will especially focus on reading and analyzing the literature stages. Nikolai, please, next slide. Of course, identifying topic is very important because before, let's say, 2005 or 2010, in Kazakhstan, all that management science was called economic science, because the main aspect of social science was the economics, and even doctor of science was, even if you have done your degree in management, it was called doctor of science in economics. So it's especially important for Central Asian countries to choose an area of research and to know that it's not economics, it's a management science. So next step is to select the field of research, of course, finance, HRM, or marketing. After that, selecting of topic of research is continuing, and main thing is to find the topic of research. Let's continue, please, Nikolai. And here, next slide, maps is very important. Why? Because during their PhD, first year of PhD, our students are reading lots of literature because they have a lack of or gap of background, especially in management, and they must read more than 100, maybe 200 articles, and lots of information are coming. And important aspect here is assembling that or organizing all that information and doing that in a proper manner so they can use that information very effectively. So most of the researchers suggest 5 types of maps which can be beneficial for early career researchers. First one is feature map, tree constructions, content map, taxonomic map, and concept map. I will explain each map more detailed in the next slides. Nikolai, please, next. Feature maps is really very useful instrument for our PhD students. Why? Because here, when you read 100, 200 articles in a very limited time, in let's say 2 or 3 months, you are trying to remember all aspects, and you cannot keep all that information in your mind. So it's advised, especially this map, by using the author's detail, questions, and what kind of concerns was in the article, materials, evidence, and main thing, writing arguments of each article, give a chance to PhD students to write that in the document and return back to, sorry, Nikolai, please back. And return back to this document again after a month and remember what's happening. But here, my advice is to add one more column here and to put a future research suggestions, because in the future, if you will prepare a review paper or systematically review paper, maybe bibliographic review paper, research directions are very important, and it will be useful to know from which article you get that suggestions. Next slide, please. Tree constructions are another map which is beneficial for our students. Why? Because you are asking the main questions or research questions and trying to answer them by writing the answers around them. For example, what are the effects of advertising? And you write the let's say maybe correct answers around them and trying to connect these questions with each other. For example, in our case, what's the effect of advertising to how does advertising work? And visualizing this is always useful for our students. Nikolai, please. Next slide. Content map was very popular, as I remember, in our research done by our colleagues 20, maybe 30 years ago, because dividing, let's say, main topics into subtopics was everything was very important. In this case, for example, characteristics of language can be divided as based on communication and based on culture, while on communication it can be divided to content and to process. And by drawing this map in the future, you can draw the ideas and how to divide your main topic, a main area into sub areas. Nikolai, please. Next slide.
So Beck, I would like to warn you if we are running out of time. If
yep, please. I'm finishing in a couple of minutes.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Taxonomic map is very useful because of the Soviet Union, taxonomy was a science by itself, and it's still useful for our students. And last map, Nikolai, please, is concept maps. When you write the concepts and try to understand how each concept is related to each other. For example, how theoretical framework is related with methodological assumptions and with data collection techniques. This map is useful for those students who care about the big picture, because connecting concepts it's not it cannot be done by everyone. It's especially for those students who care about and who are ambitious, especially in big picture. Last slide, please, Nikolai. Thank you. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for all my colleagues who are attending this workshop, and thank you for those colleagues, especially whom I know from Kazakhstan, that they attended. Thank you, everyone.
Actually, I'll back your presentation answers partially why in the last decade Kazakhstan is moving upward very rapidly in regards to the research in the field of economics and business. Thank you for doing a great job, and we are looking forward for more articles from your country to be submitted to our journal. Thank you so much. And next presentation is by our JEECAR deputy editor, Dr. Charlotte Davis. And Dr. Charlotte Davis is with the journal. She's a professor of management at Webster University here in West Virginia. And she also is our, I call it at the journal, quality control officer. And Dr. Charlotte is the last person who read each single article, make sure that commas and spellings are she is in charge of the journal's quality. And thank you, Charlotte, for doing all the wonderful job. And now it's a great opportunity to share with audience where we stand with the journal and what is our future.
Thank you, Nikolai. I appreciate that. As you've seen, we've seen and heard from a lot of really excellent scholars earlier this week and today. It's been very beneficial. Even to me, I'm not real strong on research, and it's been nice to see a review and to see other people's viewpoints on research. This is to help us all be better writers and be able to get published in quality journals. And one such journal is JEECAR. It was founded not all that long ago. We're a pretty young journal, 2014 by Dr. Megitz himself. And we started in 2014, shortly after it was founded, with becoming recognized in EBSCO and DOA and listed in the Library of Congress. And then in 2015, we were recognized by Ulrich's. So already gaining recognition, gaining some prestige in the world of journals, of academic journals. In 2016, we moved into Cabell's, which was a really, really big accomplishment. And even bigger than that, or I guess opinion-wise anyway, arguably, we were accepted for inclusion in Scopus in 2018, only 2 years ago. So we've made really good progress. And Nikolai, yes, thank you. Next slide. In 2018, Prague University of Economics selected JEECAR as their official journal. So we're gaining prestige among universities as well. In 2018, also, we were accepted into the Norwegian Register for Scientific Journals, and we've moved into ProQuest this year, including IBSS and ABI Inform and the Social Science Database, which really means that many, many more people can have access to our journal and to our articles. So there are a lot of different outlets for publication. And so why publish in JEECAR? We are fairly broad. We're a multidisciplinary, double-blind, peer-reviewed journal. That, to me, is extremely important. When I've been out, well, I've been in my current job for 10 years, but when I was working on my PhD and working on getting a job, they wanted to know, where have you published? And what kind of journals have you published in? And so having peer-reviewed journals is extremely important, and having especially double-blind so that there is as little bias as possibly can be. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so JEECAR especially provides an outlet for researchers in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. There aren't a lot of outlets, well, there probably are, not too many that I know of, that are published in English. As Dr. Let's see if I can do this right, Nurgabdeshov indicated, the English language is kind of the research language, but there aren't a lot of publications in English for these areas. And so we wanted to provide this. Or Nikolai did. I came in after he had started a good bit, but I've done research in Austria, and I've done research in several areas of Eastern Europe. I haven't done much in Central Asia, but these journals are important for people to be able to get their research out, and they may not qualify. We're not top level journal. We're pushing our quality higher all the time, but we don't match with some top level journals, but we specifically are trying to focus on quality research from these areas. We do have a shorter publication process, and a lot of the higher level journals, the A or A+ journals, you would take a couple of years before you would get your article published, going through several different reviewers and a lot of time. So we have a shorter process. We are double-blind peer reviewed. The reviewers are chosen. Nikolai does an excellent job in choosing who's going to review the papers based on the areas of expertise. Next slide, please. We also do not charge a fee to submit the article. We do charge a relatively small fee if your article is accepted for publication, because we have publication and handling costs. We also, as I think Nikolai indicated a little bit earlier, we have some optional services that other journals, some may provide, but some may not. We have English translation for a fee. We have advanced copy editing for a fee. We have some consulting and other advising sessions as necessary. So we provide some things that other journals don't necessarily provide. And again, we are indexed. We are continuing to move up with the high quality, and our hope is that we will continue to improve far beyond this. Our acceptance rate is a lot higher than a lot of journals. We do accept around 20 and 25% of the articles submitted, and that was as of September 15th. And now that we are moving to quarterly publication, we'll have more articles being sent in, more articles being published. So I think we're moving in the right direction. At this point, we are listed as number 17 in marketing journals, 17 in business and international journals. And I'm going to relate this back to what I said about us being multidisciplinary. A lot of journals are very focused on the Journal of Accountancy, the Journal of Management. We are broader in scope for that. And yes, we're becoming a quarterly publication. We're pushing toward becoming in Web of Science, more high quality, more recognition. We have been represented at AIB and AOM, and we're continuing to do that even into the future, whether it's virtual conferences or hopefully back to being face-to-face conferences. We're trying to move forward to improve ourselves and offer another option for many people who don't have many options to publish. So Nikolai, I'll give it back to you at this point.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. Thank you for all work that you have done, Dr. Davis, and for presentation as well. I would like to bring attention a little bit on the Scopus, because everybody cares about the Scopus. Even many professors in our region of Eastern Europe and Central Asia mentioned to me they care more about the Scopus and Web of Science, and Web of Science more for America. However, take my words, we are on a short list to be accepted to Web of Science, and I hope that it will be announced this November. If you can see, our citation score keeps moving upward, and we are very happy. And it's happening because of your dedication and your work, and we are very much appreciated. But the most critical is that we cite work. I like I keep repeating myself in many presentations. We all who publish with the journal should care about citations, and not only citation yourself in our journal, but keep promoting your work. Be proud of work that you have done. Share it with your colleagues. Share through the social media. And this will help you personally grow as a researcher, and will help our journal to grow. If you look at the statistics, what is happening with the readership? It's important for you to know how many people per month reading us, per daily visiting our website. Look, it's a very good numbers. Around 2,500 to 3,000 people monthly are checking our website, checking on articles. This is statistics that I personally don't have access to. It's generated automatically by open source journal agency. And per day, daily, you can see daily, we have 75 people at least on average checking and reading And with this, I'm sure will come more and more citations. And for this reason, we care that the high quality of work being published, because who is gonna cite or reference the low quality work? No one. This is why we and any other journalists trying to get to good research quality papers. This is why we do this workshop today. If you look on the readership, definitely, as all statistic and presentation been done so far, most readership comes from United States and London. However, my focus is to get it more from, as you can see on the bottom, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Central Asia. This is where we want to have our readership come from. And please, you as a representative of Slovak and Dr. Ina from this region, Eastern Europe, please promote it in your countries. Moving down, we are in the last slide and we are on a time with presentation. I would like to wrap with this. Hey, yes, all the videos are recorded and will be bundled as a package with certificate of completion of this. Conditions will be provided to you via email to those who participated in both sessions. However, I would like to make, before I come with thank you every presenters, I would like to do some pre-announcement today. It's maybe new for even for our board members. I am so thrilled and happy with these sessions that I strongly believe, after talking with few people on our editorial board in the last 2 days, we are planning to do academic conference this year, still in December. Please keep your research ready, and you will get email from me shortly in a week or so about good potential for academic conference, where you will have a chance to present your paper, conceptual ideas, etc., in a conference organized by the JEECAR in mid of December this year. I know it's important. It's important for your academic growth, for your scholarship promotions, etc., and for you. And we will be doing this conference in December. Take my word. And I look forward to having you with us, and we continue to do our job. Okay, thank you so much, all the presenters. Great job, wonderful job. I cannot find probably a right word to express my feeling, but I will do it in my emails, personal emails to you. But the most important, thank you to everybody who logged in as a participants in the last 2 days and look forward to, and wanted to learn how to become, not only how to become personal better research, but how to share your knowledge with your students, how to make your students a better researchers. Okay, and this is what journal does. We will open your door, and we have this door open for your publication. This is why we exist, and this is why we have such a wonderful team of editors and reviewers and on our editorial board. With this, thank you so much. Send me emails and I will share this presentation with each of you. I see many thank you notes popping up, and we appreciate all this that you're saying to us in writing. And with this, I would like to finish and say you thank you so much and very much appreciate all your job. Wonderful, wonderful accomplishment.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nikolai.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Alfstrom. Hope to see you.